McGee Hickey did was
Yes.
fair and
Right
accurate,
on
but
target.
then the bumper,
That
The
is,
bumper was slightly off.
because of
But
what
now,
you
see,
said.
actually for McGee Hickey, she never saw that as anything being wrong. Today, Bernard Gatsby is a recluse. He stays away from the public light, and so for her it was accurate. But see, because we understand that when they refer to our convicted felons as convicted felon so-and-so, it leaps out at us because you're seeing...
They don't make those connections or realize that
oh,
they can
no,
say
no,
what
oh,
they
wait,
do.
you know what?
Go ahead, Agnes.
You got, now, let me just point out that the person who wrote the headlines is not necessarily the person who wrote her lead, and it gets...
Yeah, that bumper may have been written by some other writer.
There's a person whose job it is to sit down and write the headlines, so that you, depending on how the newsroom is set up, you can give someone the 12 o'clock show. So here it is, the 12 o'clock broadcast, and then there's a rundown sheet telling you all of the stories we're dealing with. The person who's responsible for the headline and the tease is not the same person who's responsible for writing the lead-in copy that McGee Hickey read.
Even though she reads them both.
Right, and so what happens is, it depends on the anchor person, whether or not he or she is on top of it, on the script. And depending on what her other duties are,
I mean,
she
a
may
Dan
just go.
Rather or Peter Jennings will see something and go,
No.
wait a minute.
Exactly, change
This
it.
ain't what we want to say here. You know, so.
But when you have people of color who also read the news and tend to put their own spin on things, for example, Don Johnson, I think his name is Don Johnson, yes, for Channel 2 News.
John
whatever
Johnson, the
his
new
name
anchor,
is.
we used to be
Right.
in the 70s now too.
During the O.J. Simpson trial, he actually was not reading from the script, he was just talking. And he said, anytime he was referring to the prosecution, he talked about strategies. And when he was referring to the defense, he used tactics.
Okay.
That's
That's a semantical thing in that strategy and tactics are almost synonyms. Not quite synonyms, but in essence,
negative connotation.
and so for John, he's saying, all right, we got a defense strategy over here to do so-and-so. We got a defense tactic here to do so-and-so. And now what he's giving you is a war zone analogy.
Yeah.
And you know something? That was a correct analogy. Because O.J. Simpson was in a war. And his defense team knew they were in a war. So there's nothing negative about that connotation. That's recognition of a fact that, guess what? This man is in a serious battle for his life.
Then he goes on to say, and if he is not guilty, well, I don't know. And then he does his head like this.
Well,
So when you follow up with that,
Well, that's good, because that's the kind of body language that you are sensitive to, and the rest of you should be sensitive to also. Now, did you interpret that as him saying, well, if he's guilty and I don't know, as negative, positive, or neutral?
I interpreted that he had taken the position of O.J. Simpson was guilty and should be found so.
Was
That's the position.
Okay. And you were taking it as
sarcasm, yeah.
Sarcasm.
sarcasm.
Yeah.
Okay. Did everybody else get that on his reports also? That he was really... No, I'm asking because I refuse to watch any of the O.J. coverage. no, I'm serious. I refused to watch any of it because it was so bad. I just did not, I did not watch. It was the hardest thing to not watch it because wherever you turned, you were inundated with it. But anytime that stuff came up, I changed channels. For real.
But whenever I was forced to look at it, you would know what side the person that was
I'm
reporting.
asking, did everyone get I think O.J. is guilty from John Johnson's reports out of the field?
I didn't watch it.
No.
People too.
Speak up. What was your interpretation?
No, I said no, I never saw that. I never watched much of it. Like
You didn't watch much of it. But whenever you saw him, you didn't get that
But
sense.
I didn't see much of it. I didn't see him talking on that.
You were saying you saw him so little, you couldn't even tell.
I never
No,
paid
and this is
attention.
a good kind of give and take because things are interpreted by yourself as well as what the person is doing. So what personal baggage you bring is going to be affected by what personal baggage they bring. So if the bulk of the room felt that John's reports were negative and anti-OJ, I would say based on that unscientific survey, it probably was. If we take this cross-section of people as a cross-section of the rest of America, and if the bulk of the room felt that that's the way he was conducting himself, and that's probably the way he was conducting himself.
Well, what I saw, I mean, everyone, whoever, whether it was Don
Yeah, you can
Johnson
tell.
or whomever it was that was giving the report, you knew what side they were on.
Quite often, quite
You know,
often.
and
Now,
which-
now I saw a couple of Nightline broadcasts because the reason why I would watch Nightline is because they would make an attempt to try to dissect and discuss, but you just have to watch them with serious caution. But they weren't out there, and what they would do is they'd give you different people from different sides. Well, this is a lawyer who's an expert, and this is a prosecutor from so and so, and this is a defense attorney from so and so. And so you would listen. I would listen to a couple of them. And what I found was a number of the lawyers would say, listen, you have to understand that in our system, this man is innocent until proven guilty. Now, you would hear that once few and far between on some of those discussions, but during the course of the day, when you heard all these other reports, it was no such thing as presumption of innocence, and there was all kinds of speculation and all. So that's why I really would not watch any of the OJ coverage. So
I'd like to comment that your technique is a technique that we would hope that others of you would use in your own way, which was you saw the picture, you heard the words, and you watched his body language. Those things are the things that go on with the regular news report.
every
In
day.
other words, there are people who are concerned that even black journalists who are reporting news in the same way that
Hey,
white
gotta
reporters
write them up
are,
too.
are smiling
Exactly.
when they
Gotta
should
write
not be
them up, too.
smiling, or using that banter, that easy banter, and doing a disservice to the community by turning to one of their white colleagues after a major story.
Do not assume just because their skin color is black that they're doing
Exactly.
a service to the community.
Exactly.
You have to weigh them as objectively as you weigh every other journalist in that newsroom.
Which is to take into consideration the story, its placement, take into consideration the language, take into consideration the body language. I am a little bit concerned that in this room, we have not used as an example the Robert Johnson story. The Robert Johnson story is more contemporary than O.J. Simpson and more revealing of how local news is reported to us. Robert Johnson's story is the story that involves government, it involves crime, and the law, and all of the other things that go along
Abuse
with it.
of government power.
And how the media
Plays into it
rushed to support Governor Pataki
in his abuse
in
of
his
government
usurping
power.
the authority. The fact of the matter is that Robert Johnson had 120 days to investigate and to pull together the specifics, because he has a personal belief that the death penalty is not a good thing, is not a deterrent. He's on record. That is not news, but it was made news by the corporate media that decided that this black, and I'm going to say this black man is unable to fulfill his role as a competent DA.
As an elected.
And that I was coming to the second part about it is that he was elected by the people of Bronx County who, when he ran for office, they knew that he was not for the death penalty. And yet again, it was downplayed and downplayed to allow the governor to come in, usurp the authority of the man represented by the people with a full staff, very competent, has one of the better records throughout the city
Conviction.
for conviction.
That's right.
So
Yet, they're reporting that a certain percentage of the people in the Bronx want the death penalty.
Oh, there's no doubt about that. No, but Johnson knew that when he ran for office, and he told the entire county, if you vote for me, know that this is my stand on the death penalty.
that I'm not going to.
Period. So it's not as if he ran under false colors. They knew that before they elected him. So that's why this play by the governor, you see, the reporting of the governor's stance and how he tried to inject himself into that situation is what we're talking about. You're using your judgment on. See, because the governor can do anything he wants. He's the governor. And other elected officials have already chastised him and called it grandstanding and called it vote suborning, and that's exactly what it was. But how did the press report the governor's stance? Did the press do any commentary about him interfering with the elected process? Did anybody do anything about, well, what is the governor doing when he knows that the DA has 120 days for X, Y, and Z? I saw that maybe in one little blurb somewhere. And I think it was in the Amsterdam News, not any of the mainstream press. But that's not to say that they didn't report it. I'm just telling you, I only saw it in the Amsterdam News. So that's the kinds of things that you're looking for and looking at. See, one of the things you have to worry about also is you may see a story on television, or you may read it in a newspaper that is offensive content-wise. I mean, just what's reported really offends you as a person of color. You have to analyze the story and how it's presented, and whether the person who wrote it is what's causing you to be upset, or whether just the story is causing you to be upset. Because the reporter reported it accurately and fairly, and it's just stuff that really irritates you, you don't want to kill the messenger. See? What you want to do is acknowledge that it was well and fairly reported, and then you get to the heart of what's the reporter talking about. That's where your energy may need to be directed.
But I think it was also downplayed that it's not mandatory that he choose the death penalty.
No. And I'm not even up on all of it, but see, there's two things you have to realize. The governor is a big capital punishment man. That's step one. Step two, in this society, and it's always irritated me, if you kill a cop, everybody wants you in jail and wants you to get the death penalty. You kill any one of us walking up and down the street, they could care less whether you're in jail or get the death penalty. My reaction is always, why are you up in arms because it's a person in a blue uniform? Why are you not up in arms because it's a black person who lived in that neighborhood who got slain? And why aren't you calling for the death penalty on the person who killed that person?
Or the cops that kill people. Yeah.
See, I mean, that is, so I never get bent out of shape just because a cop got killed, because too many of our people get killed all the time and they don't do very much about it. I'm sorry that anybody loses their life, but don't get overly irate because the person whose life was snuffed happened to have on a blue uniform. You need to be just as irate when a 9-year-old kid gets run over by some guy speeding through a red light. Okay? So that is where I am on that. And that's where we, as a community, need to be really active. My daughter is a lawyer. We have these serious haranguing discussions about the death penalty. Because she says to me, the death penalty is unfair, it's unequal, it's cruel and inhuman punishment. I said, yeah, I agree with all that. And I'm a death penalty fan if you can execute it swiftly and fairly. And if you can't, then I'm on your side. But if you can, I think it'll be a deterrent. But if you can't, then it's not a deterrent. If I'm going to be on death row for 20 years, I can kill anybody I want because I can appeal forever, and so it's not a deterrent. And because it's applied in a racist manner, then I definitely am not in favor of the death penalty the way it's practiced. But in principle, I really am, if I thought it could be a deterrent. Now she says to me, but how could you be? And I said, well, look, good laws turn into bad laws when they're not enforced, or when they're enforced unfairly. Now, as a lawyer, you should weigh whether it's a good law or a bad law, and why it's a good law or a bad law, and put your energies towards making it a good law and making it effective. And if it's really a bad law, then put your energies in getting it repealed. So that's the way I always end the argument.
Well, how do you do that when the government is breaking its own laws?
Well, it's not an easy thing. It's a very difficult thing, especially the way the judicial system in this country runs. You gotta have money to beat the system. O.J. Simpson walked because he had money. If he were poor, whether he were guilty or innocent, he'd be on death row now, okay? I mean, that's just the nature of the beast in this country. Wait, you were first, and then you.
No, it's just what the case with the death penalty. I had a big argument with a co-worker of mine, and she was like, oh, yeah, that person deserved the death penalty. I said, no, you cannot say that, because if that person shot the cop, he deserved the death penalty. What about when the cop shot a young man or anyone out in the street? They deserve the same. Oh, no, they can give the death.
What about the cop that shot this other cop in the back? I mean, you know.
He's an attempted cop killer.
I mean, you know, but his fellow cops said, well, yeah, okay, fine, you don't have to give him the maximum, you know. He's a nice guy, you know, but my point is, he knew this guy shot him deliberately in the back because he was black. That's what you beat. Now, you had one, and then you.
Yeah, you know, speaking of people with money, that guy, Hunt, he killed that wrestler. You have not heard anything else about it.
Disappeared off the news, didn't it?
Like,
Did they ever arrest him? I never even found out they ever got him in jail.
Yeah,
It disappeared so much off the news.
They arrested him, but I mean, does he
haven't
have
heard
arraignment?
boo since, have you?
Nothing.
Same thing with the guy with the bombing. They
Uh-huh.
found on a train, 5 on
Oh,
the
yeah.
train.
Mary.
Oh,
Yeah, we
McFerry.
heard a little bit about it.
He got sentenced, I think.
I mean, they never showed, I think once his picture was in the paper, they showed his sister that was a victim of it. Her picture in the paper was more than
I
the
think he
issue
got
about it.
sentenced.
Did you think?
Yeah, but I'm saying like while
You're
it was going
saying-
on,
Yeah.
Oh, listen.
what happened to
KB and his guys on this Gets thing were in the papers nonstop. When his trial was going on back in '84. I mean, you would hear all about the record of the ringleader kid and all that stuff, and you get a lot of stuff on Bernie Getz too. But what you got on Bernie Getz was, is he a hero or isn't he, Mr. Vigilante? I mean, the guy was writing songs about this guy. For real. So, anyway, somebody needs to deal with this form.
Okay, let me do a recap. Are you ready to do
Yes.
it? Okay. Let me restart. Thank you, Eric. Okay. How would you like to have Eric be your teacher every day? What we're asking you to do is to take prescribed television newscasts for the next 2 weeks and to look at them. Now, we've given you all of this flesh to deal with, all of the nuances. We've given you how the business is organized. We've given you the motivation for why the time is blocked out and why people actually see it as a career and so on. We've given you the social aspect, and the aspect is that we are monitoring the news as it portrays our community, and this is very key to the task. We're asking you to put aside your own biases, your own prejudice, but to look objectively at the news and to try to get the good and the bad out of it. The news that you see is packaged. People come in hours before you see them, and there's a rundown. So the stories and where they're placed is key to what you watch. So that when you see a particular story and it's the first story, it is generally considered to be the #1 story. And if you were to flick around the station, you will see that's the same story. Now, I didn't know until I got into it how that happened. The reason why certain stories are always the top of the news at one place or the other is because there are wire services that kick out stories to the newsrooms. And so everyone is getting that wire story at the same time. And depending on the number of news elements in it, if it's a fire, how large is the fire? How many people died and so on? Is it something that is truly unique and it does have an impact on a lot of people? So firstly, think about this. Channel 4, Channel 2, and Channel 7 will have the same #1 story because firstly, sometime during the day, everybody got that story at the same time from the wire services based on a telephone call from a citizen based on a telephone call from a service agency, emergency or whatever. 3 minutes, she gave me the 3-minute sign code. Now, after that, you are now looking at the placement of the story, then you're looking at how many stories of what type there is. How many stories of what type there is. How much time they've allocated to those stories. So that if it's a good news story, hero black cop saved 29 white babies. Did they give him, did they let you hear him talk about how he did it and why he did it? How much time did they give him to do that? Based on another one of our young brothers in the sneakers, out like this, being dragged off to the precinct. Did they give it that much space or this much space? Then you're looking at who's telling the story. Is it a regular reporter, what's called a general assignment person? In other words, you saw them yesterday doing a story about going up the tree and getting a cat down. To today, they're now in the middle of, you know, a fall-on fire. That's general assignment. That's a general assignment reporter. So be aware of that. Then you have people like Taibbi, who, because they've regularly done stories like the one caught in crime, and how much license does that person take in telling the story, like slipping into Bernie versus Bernard, ad-libbing, and how much film footage is being used. And then you're paying attention to the acting people, and you're going to do something similar to when it's a #1 story or even a #5 story. Is the anchor person putting himself or herself in the story and giving you more than just the news? And those are the key elements that you're going to look at. Forget about the commercials, and then again, if you just have some spare time, you can mark down where the commercials are coming. Generally, they're blocks of time. Generally, the stations want the first 12 minutes to themselves, and they pay. And if you're advertising in that top of the news spot, then you're paying a lot more money. But those are the keys, I believe, that will help you to do this. I think that you all already well on your way to analyzing the news. It's going to be very difficult for you in that if you need to do a reality check on whether or not you're being objective, go get somebody else to come and finish watching it for you, okay? And that's it. Thank you for your time. Thank you. Excuse me? Oh, a news item. A news item is something that you can just strip it down. Okay.
Run the tape down. There's a feature at the back end which is voiceover, the Easter egg roll on the White House wall.
Something that really doesn't make an impact in your life.
Feature.
A feature you usually get at the tail end of the newscast. But hard news is a woman threw a eraser up in the air, it fell to the floor, and it left a mark.
Killed an ant.
And it killed an ant. A feature is, oh, isn't this a nice container? And you can also use it for holding chalk.
And it was made around the corner
Exactly.
by X number of
That's
people.
the difference.
Seems like something that has no impact.
No impact.
They call it a fluff piece.
Yes.
The back of the book, which would be the back of a magazine book, as opposed to up front, which would be the hard line, hard news stuff. Breaking stories are hard news. The cop got shot, the fire just broke out, the mother gave birth with the umbilical cord tied around the baby's neck, and so the 911 operator actually saved the baby's life, the kidnapping. All those are your hard news breaking stories. And then your features tend to be, let's do a profile on General Colin Powell on whether or not, now that he's decided not to run for president, he will still stay within the public eye. It's got a tie to a news base, but if you stop and think about it, I could do that story today, I could do it 3 months from today, I could do it a year from today.
what we'll do next week, we should have the tape ready with the news that you're going to be looking over. And at that time, we'll divide ourselves into two groups or whatever. If it's two stations, then we divide the class into two groups. You will have this sheet ready, which I'll explain how to do next